Please, before we go any further with this relationship of ours, hit subscribe. Thanks ever so much.
Lynx Pod. Tales and entertainment for the people of Lincolnshire with John Marshall.
Hello, I'm John Marshall, and if you're a business and you'd like to find out about a wide range of sponsorship opportunities I can offer you on Lynx Pod, the podcast for Lincolnshire, then please do get in touch. Prices start from as little as £100. So email me and let's get the conversation started. I'm john@lynxpod.co.uk. I'm totally loving doing the Lynx Pod, and I really hope you're enjoying it as much as I'm enjoying putting it together. The idea for this came about after my time at Lynx FM, a huge radio station across Lincolnshire and Newark, came to an end. I wanted to capture some of the spirit that made that radio station such a success and bottle it in podcast form. A couple of weeks ago was part one of my interview with Eddie Shaw, a man who was at Lynx FM from the very beginning. Our initial chat ends around the time Eddie Shaw joined Lynx FM, and now it's time to enjoy part two.
From Grimsby to Sleaford, Scunthorpe to Mablethorpe, this is Lynx Pod.
We probably haven't said that you would not only do the afternoon show, but you're now the head of music here. So you're organising these things, not just
absolutely
not just
organising them. And
yeah.
you know, most days I'd say to you, you know, can you do an interview so and so?
Yeah, and
we check our diaries to see whether we could do something, or it may well be the case that I send you to London to do an interview, or it could be umpteen different places, maybe a venue.
That time you stitched me up with One Direction. Do you remember that one, Eddie?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that was good.
That was a
well,
good
let me just tell you about that, because see, the interesting thing was that One Direction were massive, weren't they? I mean, they were just huge.
Their peak is when
absolutely at their peak, and the record label said to me, "Look, we're going to get an interview with you, but we can't say on air anything about it, and the presenter can't say where they're going to do the interview.
Yeah.
Right? We just can't do anything like that." So it turned out that we went to Birmingham, didn't we, to do interview with One Direction, and I came along with you because we decided, well, at that time we sort of like almost branched out again. And rather than just doing the interview, this was the time of YouTube, we would video the interview.
Film the interview, yeah.
And put it on YouTube, because we get some big numbers on those YouTube videos. So I decided I'd go along with you. I'd film the interview and we'd do it. Right?
Yeah, well...
So,
are you telling it? Yeah, you carry on.
Okay, well, do you want to say this bit?
Yeah, I thought this was my big break.
Yes,
and I would be leaving the radio and going into TV.
Into TV, right.
Because so many millions of people who are into One Direction are going to see this video, see me in doing this interview, and that would be the making of me.
Yes.
Eddie Shaw.
It wasn't quite like that. Actually,
on camera duty.
It wasn't.
I'm on the video.
You see, the trouble is...
Right at the beginning, I say... hello, the camera pans away and I'm never seen again.
The trouble is that you're sitting one side of the desk, right? And the five guys of One Direction are over this side.
Yeah. So you put your camera in one place, had a sandwich.
There's only one camera.
Yeah.
So
panning. They call it panning.
Yes, but you couldn't keep on because I didn't know who was going to talk next.
No,
out of five of them.
When you did a two-camera setup.
This is it precisely.
Yeah, okay.
So there were,
I forgive you.
Just answered the question.
I forgive you. Anyway, that's why I'm not a TV star. Yeah,
but that was just one of the many interviews, that we did, and then there are lots of stories about things that happened around.
Feel free,
all
Eddie.
Sorts of.
What you got? What's springing to mind?
Me.
Come on.
Well, I mean, Girls Aloud obviously is a classic.
Girls Aloud is a belter, isn't it?
It's a good one.
Go on.
So we had a situation where Girls Aloud came to the studio, and it was Nicola, wasn't it, who brought her dog?
It was Nicola's little dog.
Nicola's little dog. You know his name as well, don't you? This dog.
What was he called?
Elvis the dog.
That's right. Went out my head then, but Elvis.
Yeah. So Elvis came into the studio with Girls Aloud, and we thought, well, he'd just sort of sit in the corner, that'll be fine, no trouble at all.
Yeah.
But the trouble was that he did something extra in the studio.
It was an accident.
Extra in the studio, didn't he?
Yeah, there was an accident. And they had somebody in the van outside who seemed to me at the time was their job.
Right.
If there were any accidents, they would come and deal with the accident. So somebody was called in from outside, weren't they?
Fine, yeah.
I remember that.
So did the interview. Everything was fine, and we used to take photos and things in the studio, didn't we, of all the different stars and things. And off they went again. Well, this is probably only 6 months later, isn't it? Actually?
Yeah.
The next time that we were to do an interview with Girls Aloud, they weren't in the studio. They were on what we called then ISDN.
No, you got this slightly wrong. This was not with Girls Aloud. This was Nicola doing a solo single. You said, can you interview Nicola?
Right.
Nicola. Of course, I'm good mates with her now.
Are you sure that it wasn't just Nicola from Girls Aloud?
It was Nicola from Girls Aloud.
Yeah, but rather than her doing a solo song...
Oh, she was representing Girls Aloud.
Oh,
she might have been, Eddie.
That might be the case.
She might have been just the one. I was talking to one person from Girls Aloud.
I think
and
it
was
might
Nicola.
have been the case.
Yeah.
So anyway, so she was in London, right? And John's in the studio in Lincoln. And we used to have this setup where it was as if the sound quality was, like sitting next to each other, like you and I are sitting next to each other now. So Nicola came on, and we always used to have a little bit of banter before we would go live as such in recording the interview. How are you, Nicola? I saw you a few months ago in the studio, and, everything all right, da-di-da. So John started the interview.
My opening question was... How's that dog of yours, Elvis?
Yeah.
And shall I go now, Eddie? So Nicola starts crying.
Yes.
He's
only just started the interview, and she's crying.
Opening question 1. He died. She said like that, didn't she? He died. But he died a horrible death.
Yeah.
And this had bothered her very much. It just happened.
Yeah.
She was teary and she was crying.
She was.
Told this story about the horrific death of the dog.
Yeah.
And then I had to say, tell me about the new single. And
the new Girls Aloud single.
Yeah, I thought, I ain't got what I need yet. And she's crying. Are you all right, love?
Yeah.
So I made Nicola cry. Yeah. My apologies.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that it's a legendary story.
It's a great story.
A legendary story.
We rolled that one out every Christmas,
absolutely.
Didn't we? Yeah.
And there was, it wasn't either you or me, but it was Rob Hammond, who I think did an interview with, I can't think who it was, somebody really big at the time. And I sent him down to London to do this interview. And he was in the studio in London doing the interview. And at the end of it, there was a number of different radio stations who were there doing interviews. Rob was one of them. And they said, right, the best thing to do is, as you're on the way out, go out the back door, because there's a lot of people out the front, because it's a famous person who's in the studio.
Yeah.
So he went out the back door. And of course, all the people who had the cameras, the camera crews, the PAP, were all standing at the back door because, of course, they put 2 and 2 together. There's no way they're going to come out the front. They'll go around the back. So the door swung open.
There's Hammond. Brilliant.
And it was Rob Hammond. Yeah, it wasn't.
That's good.
It wasn't the star.
That's brilliant.
It was just Rob Hammond.
Do you remember Rob Hammond's Ed Druitt story?
Oh, that's great.
That was great. So Rob's on air. It's The Wanted, I think, wasn't it?
It was The Wanted,
So The Wanted have come in. And
the thing is, a lot of the interviews we did weren't live.
No.
And there was a good reason for that.
Well, this is a good reason, isn't it?
Yeah. But a lot of the interviews, you wanted to get the best from them, and you wanted to be able to play that 4 or 5 minutes of the really best parts of it. And someone would come into the studio, they may talk for 20 minutes. So we wanted to get the best bit. So therefore, a lot of the interviews weren't live.
No, I think that day The Wanted came in, I did an interview with them in one studio for a play out another time. And then they said, why don't you pop in and do a bit live with Rob?
Right.
And they were talking about the new song, weren't they?
They were talking about this new single.
And Rob said, how did you come up with the idea for the new single or something? And they said Ed Druitt. Who you and me may know, Eddie. He's a very famous songwriter.
Called Ed Druitt. Yeah.
And Rob said, out of a hat, as if they'd put a load of names of songs in a hat and pulled one out and gone, we'll call it that. Yeah. I'm glad you came.
Yeah, glad you came.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
He was so embarrassed, wasn't he?
Well, he was embarrassed, but I mean, the interview fell apart at that stage.
It was over,
because The Wanted, they just couldn't talk.
They couldn't contain themselves.
They were in so much laughter, weren't they, at the time? It was just hilarious.
Out of a hat, because we'd all popped in there as well, hadn't we? It wasn't just them in the studio. We were all stood around the studio while Rob's doing the big interview because we wanted to be part of it.
Well, maybe it was the case that we were videoing it at the time or something like that.
I think we probably were.
I don't really remember now.
Brilliant.
But no, it's a good story. And, there were just so many other things. And really, I suppose the people who we interviewed sort of like moved on the next stage, and we decided, well, look, why don't we put our own show on?
Yes.
And we then, I think it was, I can't remember what the very first one was that we did.
Don't ask me.
I've got a feeling it might have been in Boston.
Okay.
And I can't remember. I think it was a woman, sort of like a singer-songwriter woman.
Right.
And the idea was that we would get listeners to come to the gig. There would be no money. There'd be no tickets involved.
It's all free.
All free of charge. And they would come along and we'd record part of it and we'd maybe play some of it back at a later stage. But it was great for the listeners because, they got into a free gig and sometimes, it was just a fantastic night, as you know yourself.
And the reason some of these acts would agree to do this, because we were punching above our weight again here, weren't we?
Yes.
Is Lynx FM's success meant a big audience, and you could say we'll put the song higher in rotation on the radio if you'll do a gig for us. That was the bargaining chip, wasn't it?
That's basically it.
Yeah.
Quite often, a lot of the time, we would say, well, look, I tell you what, we're playing the current song at the moment, but when the new song comes out in 2 months' time, we'll guarantee to give that some support as well.
Sure.
So, and that was, sort of like the bargaining chip that we had. And we did various shows. Probably the most famous has to be Adele.
Adele, yeah. Where I wasn't, by the way.
You didn't go to that?
No, I was on holiday.
It was a good
thanks.
gig.
Yeah.
It was a good gig. But the story behind that was this guy called Chris, who was at the record label. He came up to see me one day in the office, and we went out for lunch. And we were at lunch just sort of chatting about different things. And he said, we've got this singer called Adele. And she'd had a song called Chasing Pavements out before, which was, a decent-sized hit. But she was never at the level, that she came to be later on. And she'd had an album called 19, which came out before and did okay as well. But he said, look, she's coming back. We've got a new album coming out and some good new songs. And maybe we could come up and do a show for you in Lincolnshire. And I distinctly remember going back to the office afterwards, after this conversation, and chatting to a few people and saying, I think I might have Adele who could perform a live show for us. And people were very underwhelmed.
Really?
They really were. It was as if I'd said, there's a girl I met down on the street corner who might do a show for us.
Yeah, she might be up
honestly,
for
it was like that. It really was. So we organised this show, and it was at Louth, at the Riverhead Theatre in Louth, that we did the show. And Adele turned up. She sang probably about 7 songs, something like that. It was her and a keyboard player. That was all it was, just the 2 people on stage. And for the very first time, she sang some songs from this new upcoming album called 21.
Wow.
Which, the songs weren't known. No. They weren't even out. And, it was just an amazing night, as you can well imagine.
Of course it was. Wow.
Literally, in a small theatre, it's probably less than 200 people there that night. And my guess is that every single one of those people, if you asked them today, would still remember that night.
Yeah, of course
really well.
They would, yeah.
But the thing was that it was just about a week or 2 before the Brit Awards, and she was due to appear at the Brit Awards and sing one of these songs.
Yeah. Someone Like You, wasn't
Someone Like You.
Yeah.
So she sang it as sort of like a rehearsal in front of a live audience in Louth before going to the Brit Awards and performing it live on TV.
This is Lynx Pod.
The world's #1 Gary Barlow tribute act Dan Hadfield plays live at Tension Twisted Realities in Lincoln on Saturday the 3rd of May, the very first Lynx Pod party. This event is so close to being fully sold out, so grab those tickets now and get set for an amazing evening, enjoying the songs of Take That and Gary Barlow. The evening's going to include a charity raffle in support of the Links and Knots Air Ambulance. Head to tensiontwistedrealities.co.uk and click on events.
This is LinksPod.
Local businesses across Lincolnshire have been benefiting from advertising on LinksPod, and your business can benefit too, with prices starting from as little as £100. Rand Farm Park, Daisy Maid Farm, the Petwood Hotel at Woodhall Spa, Tension Twisted Realities in Lincoln, and the band The Illegal Eagles are amongst those who've already joined the LinksPod party. Add your business name to that list now. Find out more and get the conversation started by emailing me. I'm john@linkspod.co.uk.
Never miss an episode of LinksPod. Subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Say some of the other acts we did. Noel Gallagher was a very special
Noel
night.
Gallagher, that was a really special day as well, you know, and the backstory to that is Noel is a big football fan, as you know, as a Man City fan, and he said that the only way he would come and do the show in Lincoln is if we booked him a hotel room and he could watch the match. It was I think it was a lunchtime kickoff on that particular day. It was a Saturday evening that he did the gig in Lincoln, and he would only come if we could see Manchester City on a TV screen in the hotel. Well, trying to organise that was so difficult to do, but we managed to do it.
Right.
And in the end, he didn't turn up at the hotel until much later.
So he didn't even
see it on the TV. But he did turn up at the venue and put an amazing show on. Unbelievable. Brilliant. And it was a full band.
Yeah,
as
he
well.
did the full show. I think it was 2 gigs around it, wasn't there? So he said, well, I'll bring the full band.
Yeah.
And he did what, an hour and a half? Something?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it was only about 2 or 3 nights later.
Yeah.
They did a gig for Radio 2, BBC Radio 2. You know, they were building up to that. So they wanted to run through the whole set and make sure everything was right before they did that show. Hence the reason why the Lincoln show existed.
This is at Bishop Grot College.
Bishop Grot.
Or is it uni now? Yeah.
You know how small that venue is.
Yeah.
There was no more than 150 people max at that venue.
Amazing.
But the thing was, I appeared during the morning on that particular day because I wanted to make sure that everything was okay. And outside, there was great big lorries, massive lorries outside, loading all the equipment in, you know. And I mean, it was an absolute full band, absolute top quality performance that night.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just one of those really, really special occasions.
Could go on about these. Ricky Ross was one of my favourite nights of my career when I got to host that in Scunthorpe.
It was at Scunthorpe, at the college in Scunthorpe.
Ricky Ross from Deacon Blue on his piano and sort of me interjecting with questions every few songs, wasn't it? Yeah.
But the idea was that we had it in what we'd call a round. So Ricky would be in the middle on his piano and everyone would sit round him rather than in a sort of like theatre style.
Yes, that was it.
Which was fine. And I said to the college, have you got a piano in your music department?
Oh, you had some piano trouble, didn't you?
We've got a piano, no trouble at all.
No problem.
So I got this piano and I said to his management what the piano was, the make of it and all the details. Oh, no, that won't be good enough for Ricky. He wants a certain spec of piano. So in the end, I had to get this piano delivered all the way from Leeds because it's the only place we could find this particular spec of piano that he wanted. And that's, you know, just some of the background to some of these events, you know, that you have to put on. Yeah. And of course, we had the birthday events as well.
Yeah.
We did an 18th birthday, which was, in fact, I think we had one I think the 18th one was in Grimsby.
Okay.
And the 21st one was at the Baths Hall in Scunthorpe.
Great times.
And I mean, you know, they were just really good. Really good. Really good.
We've got to get on to the sad bit. Should we go on to the sad bit now, Eddie? Because this didn't all last forever because we're not doing it now, are we?
Absolutely not. But, you know, the great thing was that, you know, we did it for many years and it was very, very successful. And I suppose, you know, the more successful you get, like if you're running a business of any sort, doesn't matter whatever business it is, there are other people who are looking in from the outside, looking at the business, whether it's radio or whether it's making cardboard boxes.
Yeah.
And if it's successful and it's making money and profitable, then other people with a large pocket may well think to themselves, if only we could buy that company and then we could make the profit.
Yeah.
And that's really how the story came about, because, there was a time when some radio groups were getting quite big and they were buying up different radio stations and making themselves, quite a big entity within the radio industry. And to be fair, Lynx FM held off for many, many years. There were many occasions, I think, when Lynx FM was almost ready to be sold. But the people who actually ran the purse strings decided not to do it. But I guess the temptation got to a stage where the money was so big that people decided, well, look, I think this is the time really.
This is the one. Yeah.
To sell up.
Were you in the building when that announcement was made? I was again on holiday.
There's a theme here, isn't there?
I got a phone call at Centre Parks. I don't go to Centre Parks anymore because I only get bad news when I'm there. Yeah.
I was in the building at the time, and everyone sort of was told to gather round in the middle of the office. Just gather round, and we were told, look, it's really sorry to say this, but Lynx FM has been sold. And people were crying. Literally, they were crying in the office, at that time, because this radio station had existed for such a long while and was so successful. The people were really close knit. It was almost like family out.
Yeah, it was,
wasn't it? Really?
Yeah.
And they knew full well that Lynx FM wouldn't survive like it did at that particular point. Although there was really another side to that story, because even though it was sold, the problem was that they had to get it through the Monopolies Commission.
Yes.
For them to actually take it over. They could buy it, but they couldn't actually take it over.
Which was kind of good news.
How they wanted it.
Good news for us, because we got to be told, you've been bought, but you could stay as you are for the foreseeable.
It was 18 months.
Almost as if it didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I remember full well, just for a day or two, these people who we never knew came into the office.
Yes.
Right? And they sort of sat down at the desk and didn't really talk to many people at all, and just sort of got on with their work. And these were people from the company that bought us.
Yeah.
And I think I went out at lunchtime somewhere, and I came back only about the second day that they were there, and they'd just gone. And I said to somebody, what's happened? Where have they gone? They've had to leave. They've had to leave the building. And it transpired that the reason was because the Monopolies Commission were running this campaign, or to verify the fact that they could buy the radio station. They couldn't have any influence at all on what Lynx FM did up until a time that the Monopolies Commission could say, yes, go ahead and take it over. So, as you say, we ran for 18 months or so. Yeah,
as we were.
Exactly as we were.
And then Bauer, who it was, started coming eventually and started making tweaks.
Yeah.
Initially, it was just some tweaks, wasn't it?
Yeah, small tweaks and things.
I think they were nervous because of the success of Lynx FM.
Yeah, and I had conversations with people at Bauer, because I knew quite a lot of the people at Bauer. And they were saying to me, well, look, this is such a successful radio station that we don't want to make any changes that's going to change that. In fact, I remember really vividly, I had a very interesting conversation with someone, and they said, we've been checking on the amount of streaming that Lynx FM gets. In other words, the amount of people who were listening to it on Alexa, on a smart speaker, or on the internet, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And at that particular time, and I was sworn to secrecy, but it's okay now to say it, at that particular time, Lynx FM had more listeners on streaming services than the rest of the Bauer network put together.
Wow.
That was how successful it was.
Wow.
It was just, huge. And as you say, they were really, really cautious about trying to change things around because they didn't want to lose that audience. It was a big audience.
Sure.
And there was no reason why they should suddenly lose it. If you've paid X amount of money for something, you wouldn't want to...
You want to look after it.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to throw it away.
No.
You'd want to look after it. So that was it. But as you say, as time went by, more and more things happened and changes took place.
Yeah, we started to sound more and more like the station that as now exists, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose I was involved in the music at the time, and even though we ran our own music, I was in meetings saying, well, can you put that song on because, we want to play, that's the sort of musical style we want.
Yeah, they had a master plan, didn't they? Where it was heading, and gradually took it in that direction.
Absolutely,
which the result of which was Hits Radio and Greatest Hits Radio.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the end came for Eddie Shaw.
Well, yes.
At some point in this story.
I mean, after, a lot of people were made redundant, but it was 4 years later.
Yeah.
That and at that time I was working for Greatest Hits Radio then, not just in Lincolnshire but national, the national radio station.
Yep.
I was scheduling all the music for the national output for Greatest Hits Radio at the time.
Yeah.
And I was called to a meeting in London, and they basically said, look, we're going to reorganise things around, and I'm sorry, you just haven't got a job.
Wow.
Which was, really a sad day. I mean, I suppose in a sense, a lot of people have said that they could see it coming. For me, it wasn't quite that way. I didn't really, because I felt that, Greatest Hits Radio was a huge success. We were the biggest audience commercial radio station in the country.
Mate, I can see what you mean, because I always thought if you land a job that's working not just at one site, as I was, you were in more of a stronger position. And you were working for the big network.
Absolutely. But, they wanted to change things around. And so, that was it. So they asked me if I'd like to stay on and work my notice, or we'll just pay you. So I said, well, you may as well pay me then. And so that was it. So I left on that very day I left. And that was in London. I was in London at the time, so I literally got the train back, and
that was it.
And that was it. And really, I didn't really know where the future was going to be.
Well, I thought the future was nothing, but you were going to relax a bit.
And that was, exactly what the plan was. I didn't have any real sort of aspirations. To be fair, I'd done virtually everything I wanted to achieve.
Yeah. You didn't want to go back to the biscuits.
So I didn't want to go back to the biscuits, no.
But now...
but, things change, don't they? And literally I got a message just literally out of the blue. And it really was just literally out of the blue.
Yeah.
From a long-standing friend of mine who said, would you fancy doing some work for us? And this is another national radio station called Boom Radio.
Yeah.
And basically they said, just come along and we'll have a chat and just sort of go through the formalities and we'll see how we can get on. So I had this sort of like interview as such. It wasn't really much of an interview, but an interview. And they said, yeah, okay, well, we'll set you off and get to know how we do things, and we'll take it from there. So that's really where I am at the moment. I'm working for them. It's not, full time, and I don't really want to be in that situation again to work 5-6 days a week again. But it's nice, like you, radio is in our veins, really. That's what we've done for so long. To suddenly give that up is a real handbrake turn. And although I didn't mind it. I almost sort of put it to bed, really, and left it to one side and moved on with life. But this opportunity has come up, and I suppose in a sense is the best of both worlds, because I still have a lot of free time, but also I'm sort of dabbling in the world of radio still, which is nice.
Good for you.
So,
right.
So that's brought us bang up to date.
There we are. That's the story. The Eddie Shaw story. Been really good having you on, mate. Thank you ever so much. Eddie Shaw.
From the Humber to the Wash. Lynx Pod with John Marshall.
And that's another episode done of the Lynx Pod. Thank you to Keza on camera, all the contributors. Please, 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 if you've enjoyed this, hit subscribe and tell your friends about it. Next week, another one of my old Lynx FM colleagues joins me for a good old chat about the good old days. Don't miss Rob Hammond. Yes, the man himself will be on this podcast. I'll catch you next week.
Lynx Pod. Never miss an episode. Subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.